In winter, medieval huts could turn colder than the air outside, frost biting the walls, wind slipping through every gap. Yet peasants lay down each night and woke again. What happened between dusk and dawn holds details few have ever heard, and they defy everything you thought you knew about medieval survival. The secrets that kept entire families alive through brutal winters weren't just about endurance, they were engineering marvels hidden under piles of straw and animal fur. Here's what it was really like to survive a winter night in medieval Europe. Hey, quick thing before we start. If you actually listen to these regularly, hit like or subscribe. I always wonder where everyone's at, so comment your city and what time it is. Weird to think some of you are having breakfast in London while I'm recording this at night here in the States. So, we're going back to medieval Europe tonight. But hold on, get yourself comfortable first. I mean it. Fix your pillows, grab that blanket. This one's worth settling in for. You open your eyes to complete darkness. The cold hits you first, a sharp, brutal slap across your face, the only part of you exposed to the air. Your breath forms little clouds that disappear into the blackness above. That distinct smell fills your nostrils. Smoke, animals, unwashed bodies, and something earthy that seems to seep from the walls themselves. It's that hour before dawn when the world feels like it's holding its breath, the coldest part of the night. This isn't your bed. This is a peasant hut in medieval Europe sometime in the 1300s, and you're about to discover how people survived winter nights that regularly dropped below freezing without any of the things you take for granted. No central heating, no insulated walls, no electric blankets, not even a proper chimney. I spent months researching medieval heating systems for a history project, and let me tell you, what I found was mind-blowing. These people weren't just huddling together and hoping for the best. They had systems, really clever systems that most history books completely ignore. You sit up slowly, careful not to disturb the heavy layers of scratchy wool and straw beneath you. The hut is tiny, maybe 15 feet across, with walls made of timber frames filled with wattle and daub, a mixture of sticks, clay, and animal dung. There's a hole in the roof for smoke to escape, but it also lets in the occasional snowflake that melts before it reaches the floor. The first thing that catches your attention is the floor. It's not flat. There's a depression in the centre, about 2 feet deep and 4 feet across. That's where the fire is. Not on the floor like you'd expect, but sunken into it. This isn't some primitive design flaw. This is medieval engineering at its finest. Wait, you might be thinking, why put a fire in a hole? Wouldn't that make it harder to cook over? Actually, this sunken hearth was a stroke of genius. When medieval peasants dug their fires into the ground, they discovered something that transformed their ability to survive winter. See, a regular fire on a flat surface sends heat straight up. Great if you're standing directly over it, useless if you're anywhere else in the room. But a sunken hearth, that changed everything. The physics worked like this. When you put a fire below floor level, the heat flows sideways first before rising. It's like spreading butter on warm bread. The warmth distributes evenly across the entire floor instead of shooting straight up to the ceiling. This meant every corner of the hut got some heat, not just the area directly above the flames. And those stones surrounding the hearth, they're not just to prevent fires from spreading. Those heavy rocks absorbed heat all day and kept radiating warmth hours after the flames died down. They worked like medieval heat batteries, storing enough warmth to keep toes from freezing until sunrise. Okay, but what kind of stones? I literally spent hours researching this because it matters. River rocks. They worked best because they held heat longest without cracking under thermal stress. Medieval peasants knew this from experience. The wrong kind of stone could literally explode if it got too hot too fast. The old woman tending the fire, you assume she's the grandmother, kneels beside the sunken hearth. Her fingers are gnarled with arthritis, but she moves with the confidence of someone who's done this thousands of times. She stirs the embers with a stick, bringing the fire back to life after its night under a blanket of ash. That's another thing. These fires almost never went out completely. Banking the fire, covering hot coals with ash before bed, kept embers alive all night. It was like putting the heat to sleep instead of killing it. Done right, the buried coals stayed warm until morning and could be revived with a bit of kindling and some strategic blowing. In your head, you're doing the math. No fire for 8 hours, death by freezing. Medieval peasants couldn't just strike a match to start over. Fire was life, and keeping it alive overnight was a skill passed down through generations. The floor under your feet feels unexpectedly warm. Looking closer, you notice it's not just dirt. There's a layer of ash spread beneath the rushes covering the floor. This wasn't laziness or poor housekeeping. Ash contains thousands of tiny air pockets that trap and hold warmth much better than plain dirt. Some peasants even mixed ash with clay for better heat retention, creating a thermal barrier against the cold earth. "This is actually brilliant," you whisper, and the old woman looks up, obviously not understanding your words, but recognizing the tone of appreciation. She gestures for you to come closer to the fire, which is now crackling to life. The central placement of the hearth was strategic too. It distributed heat equally in all directions. A wall fire would only warm half the space. This central position ensured every sleeping spot got its fair share of heat. You glance up and notice another key feature of the hut: wooden platforms near the ceiling. These elevated sleeping areas weren't just space-saving measures, they were prime real estate during freezing nights. You see, hot air rises, while cold air sinks toward the floor. Heated air floats up and collects near the ceiling. Those platforms, essentially wooden lofts, captured the warmest air in the hut. The temperature difference between floor level and the raised sleeping area could be several degrees, enough to make the difference between shivering misery and comfortable rest. You watch as children begin to stir on these platforms. They were given the elevated spots because their smaller bodies lost heat faster than adults. The old woman reaches up and helps a young boy, maybe 5 years old, climb down from the loft. His hair is matted, his face smudged with dirt. But he looks well rested and reasonably warm despite the freezing temperatures outside. "Whoa, wait," you say, though nobody understands you. Did people actually sleep comfortably in these conditions? The answer is surprisingly complex. Medieval peasants didn't just survive winter nights, they developed systems to sleep through them with reasonable comfort. The key was in how they built their beds. Looking more closely at the sleeping platforms, you notice they're not solid. There are small gaps between the wooden planks. This clever design allowed heated air to flow up from below, while still providing solid sleeping surfaces. It was like sleeping on a warm air grate, except comfortable enough for a full night's rest. The platform beds themselves are layered with thick straw mattresses, not the thin bedding you might imagine, but substantial constructions. These were thick bundles sewn into cloth casings, creating thousands of insulating air pockets. Each piece of straw was like a tiny thermos bottle, holding warm air in its hollow centre. Multiply that by thousands of straws and you get serious insulating power. The old woman notices you examining the bedding and pulls back a corner of the straw mattress with pride. You can see it's not just a single layer, there are actually two distinct bundles with an air gap between them, creating an insulation sandwich. The trapped air prevented heat from transferring downward into the cold platform below. "That's at least a foot thick," you murmur, impressed. In cold regions, winter bedding often reached 12 inches deep. Climbing in was like sinking into a warm, lumpy cloud that smelled distinctly like a barn. Not pleasant by modern standards, but far better than freezing to death. Around the edges of the sleeping areas, you notice rolled cloth barriers, like pool noodles made of fabric. These sealed the edges of the bedding, preventing heated air from leaking out sideways. It was like caulking gaps around windows, except the windows were beds. The old woman motions for you to help her roll up the bedding. You notice the layering strategy. Heavier materials on the bottom for support, light, fluffy materials on top for maximum air trapping right next to bodies. The whole family's bedding is piled together in the day to conserve space in the tiny hut. A young woman, probably the mother, emerges from a corner where she's been feeding a baby. She's wearing what looks like a wool cap, even indoors. This wasn't a fashion choice. Woolen nightcaps were essential survival gear for peasants who knew heat escapes from heads faster than water through a broken dam. The head thing makes sense, you nod. We lose like 30% of our body heat through our heads. Actually, that's a modern myth, but medieval peasants were onto something important. The head's rich blood supply does make it a significant heat leak. A bare head in winter was like leaving the front door wide open while trying to heat the house. Nightcaps were knitted tight to hug scalps and trap radiating heat. Some covered ears and necks for better retention. The mother adjusts her cap and reaches for a piece of cloth hanging near the fire. She folds it quickly and wraps it around her neck several times before tucking the ends in. Neck sealing was an advanced technique. The neck is like the body's chimney. If you don't block it, heat escapes upward. Another mystery catches your eye. In the corner of the hut, behind a simple wooden barrier, several chickens are huddled together, occasionally clucking softly. There's also what appears to be a goat lying on a bed of straw. These animals weren't just food sources, or kept for eggs and milk. They were living heaters. "No way," you whisper. "They brought livestock inside for warmth." The old woman nods as if understanding your question, pointing to the animals and then hugging herself in a universal gesture for warmth. Farm animals produce body heat constantly without requiring fuel or maintenance. One goat could raise a small hut's temperature by several degrees, like having a furnace that fed itself and provided milk for breakfast. The arrangement was mutually beneficial. The animals received shelter while the humans gained a steady heat source that never went out. Different animals offered different heating benefits. Pigs generated intense warmth from their body mass, while chickens worked well in groups, multiplying their heating effect through clustering. The barriers separating animal areas from human sleeping spaces meant heat benefits without having to share beds with livestock. It was like having roommates who couldn't complain but made barnyard comments at inconvenient hours. The positioning of animals within the hut was strategic too. Larger animals were kept near the centre where their heat could reach everyone. Smaller animals like chickens were placed in corners, creating heated pockets perfect for children to sleep near. You notice something else interesting about the animals. Their bedding. The straw under the goat and chickens isn't just for their comfort. It serves double duty as hut insulation. Their breath adds warm, moist air that feels more comfortable than dry heat, like having multiple humidifiers that generated heat without electricity. The timing worked perfectly too. Animals are most active in evenings and early mornings, producing peak warmth when humans needed it most. Natural biological rhythms aligned with human heating requirements. But the smell, you think, wrinkling your nose. And yes, the odour is strong. A mixture of animal waste, unwashed bodies, smoke, and the earthiness of the structure itself. But freezing to death has a worse odour. Survival meant accepting the less pleasant aspects of effective heating. The old woman catches your expression and laughs, making a similar face and pointing to the animals. Some things transcend language. She shrugs as if to say, "Yes, it stinks, but we stay warm." The father of the family stirs now, rising from his sleeping spot on the floor near the fire. Unlike the children, adults often slept at ground level to tend the fire during the night. He stretches and immediately moves to check the animals, adding some feed to keep them generating maximum heat. Well-fed animals generated more body heat. It was like biological central heating that also produced eggs, milk, and eventually meat. The arrangement required careful feed planning to maximize heat production during the coldest parts of winter. What's really crazy, you think to yourself, is that this isn't random. This is a system, and you're right. These weren't desperate people doing whatever they could to survive. This was sophisticated engineering using available materials and a deep understanding of heat, insulation, and biology. The entire family is awake now, moving through what is clearly a well-established morning routine. The father adds wood to the fire while the mother prepares a simple breakfast, a pot of something porridge-like cooking over the flames. The children fold bedding and help with chores. You notice something odd about their movements. They all seem to be following the heat. As the fire grows stronger, family members shift position, capturing maximum warmth while completing their tasks. It reminds you of cats seeking sun patches across a floor. "So wait," you say aloud, though they don't understand. "Did medieval peasants just shiver all winter and hope for the best? Or did they actually sleep through the night?" The answer, you discover as the day unfolds, is neither. Medieval peasants didn't sleep straight through winter nights at all. They practiced a form of segmented sleep that worked perfectly for their survival needs. As the grandmother stirs the porridge, she begins telling a story to the smallest child. You don't understand the words, but the rhythm is soothing, almost hypnotic. The older woman gestures to the fire, then to the sleeping platforms, then makes a motion like banking the flames. She holds up 2 fingers, then closes her eyes briefly, then opens them wide, then closes them again. It suddenly clicks. She's describing their sleep pattern. First sleep and second sleep, with a period of wakefulness in between. It wasn't poor sleep, it was intentional scheduling that gave time to tend fires during the coldest, most dangerous night hours. The pattern went like this: bed after sunset for about 4 hours, a natural middle night awakening for 1 to 2 hours of activity, then second sleep until dawn. The timing aligned perfectly with natural body rhythms and practical heating requirements. That's actually healthier than how we sleep now, you realise. Modern research suggests humans naturally tend towards segmented sleep when not influenced by artificial lighting and strict schedules. The grandmother mimes tending the fire during that middle night awakening, then checking on the children, adjusting bedding and other essential tasks. The wakeful period served multiple practical purposes beyond fire management. You realise you're witnessing something remarkable. Not a primitive struggle for survival, but a sophisticated system that worked with nature instead of against it. These peasants weren't just enduring winter, they had mastered it using nothing but careful observation, generational knowledge, and materials they could gather from their immediate environment. As the family sits down to their morning meal, the father opens the door to check the weather. A blast of frigid air rushes in, and you feel your modern appreciation for central heating surge. Outside, the world is covered in frost, trees standing like crystalline sculptures against a pale sky. But inside this humble hut, despite the simplicity and the smell, it's surprisingly comfortable. Not warm by modern standards, certainly, but survivable, even pleasant in its way. The grandmother catches your eye and smiles, nodding toward the fire. She doesn't need words to communicate her pride in this system that has kept her family alive through countless winters. 7 simple techniques working together transformed medieval survival from desperate endurance into strategic comfort. And as you watch this family go about their morning, you realise you've been thinking about medieval life all wrong. These weren't people stumbling through a primitive existence, waiting for progress to rescue them. These were ingenious engineers using physics, biology, and careful observation to solve one of humanity's most persistent challenges: how to stay warm when the world turns cold. The real miracle wasn't just that they survived, it's how well they survived using nothing but what nature provided and what their hands could build. The morning meal is simple but filling: a thick porridge made from barley and a few dried apples from last autumn's harvest. The family eats quickly, no one speaking much. When every calorie matters for survival, eating isn't social time. It's refueling. Can I try some? You wonder, and as if reading your mind, the grandmother pushes a wooden bowl toward you. The porridge is bland but oddly satisfying, with a nutty flavour and occasional sweet bursts from the dried fruit. No sugar, of course. That's a luxury even most nobles can't afford regularly. The father gets up first, wiping his bowl clean with a piece of hard bread. Nothing goes to waste here. He pulls on a second woolen tunic over the one he slept in and wraps his legs in strips of cloth, medieval leggings that provide surprising warmth. All right, you're probably wondering why they're wearing all those layers instead of pants, the father says. Okay, he doesn't actually say that, but if he could, he'd explain that multiple thin layers trap heat better than one thick layer. The cloth strips around his legs can be adjusted for different activities and dried quickly if they get wet, crucial when you only own 2 sets of clothes and freezing to death is a daily threat. The mother hands him a cloth bundle, lunch, and he heads for the door. There's work to be done regardless of temperature. Fields need maintenance, animals need tending, and wood needs cutting. Winter isn't a holiday, it's just harder work for less reward. Before leaving, he checks the woodpile stacked carefully near the door. It's organised by size and type: small kindling pieces, medium logs, and a few larger pieces that will burn slowly. This isn't random. Each size serves a specific purpose in fire management. Got enough wood there? You might joke, but the stakes are deadly serious. Running out of firewood in winter was a death sentence. Medieval peasants started collecting the next winter's wood the moment the previous winter ended. The father eyes the pile, mentally calculating if it will last until spring. As he opens the door, another blast of frigid air sweeps in. Outside, the world is a grayscale painting. White snow, black tree trunks, and the grey sky promising more snow before nightfall. His breath forms thick clouds as he steps out, closing the door quickly behind him. With the father gone, the hut feels immediately colder. It's not just psychological. You've lost a human heating element. The mother notices too and adds a small piece of wood to the fire, just enough to maintain heat, not a bit more. You'd burn through a week's worth of wood in a day if you tried to make the place actually warm by modern standards. The children are getting ready for their day too. The oldest, a girl of maybe 12, helps her younger siblings dress in multiple layers. Even the smallest tasks take longer in winter. Cold fingers fumble with clothing, stiff fabric resists folding, and no one wants to expose skin to the chilly air. So this is their morning routine, you ask, though they can't understand you. What happens now? The grandmother answers your question through actions. She reaches for a basket in the corner and pulls out wool, some raw and fluffy, some already spun into yarn. Winter was prime time for indoor work. Daylight hours were spent on essential tasks that couldn't be done in the dark, while the longer evenings were dedicated to crafts and repairs. The mother joins her, settling by the fire with a spindle. Her fingers move automatically, drawing out the wool and twisting it into yarn with practiced motions. This isn't just busy work, it's survival. New clothes, repairs to blankets, and items to trade all come from these hours of spinning and weaving. The medieval economy at work, you mutter, watching their practiced movements. The grandmother looks up and smiles, misinterpreting your words as admiration for her skill. She holds out a tuft of wool, offering to teach you. As you awkwardly attempt to copy her movements, you notice something about the wool. It's incredibly oily. Modern wool has been cleaned and processed, but this raw material is still full of lanolin, the natural oil from sheep. It makes your fingers slippery, but serves a purpose. The oil provides water resistance and additional insulation to the finished garments. Smart, you say, and the grandmother nods, somehow understanding your meaning across centuries of language difference. The oldest daughter has set up her own work now, using a small loom to weave what looks like the edge of a blanket. Even the younger children have tasks, winding yarn into balls or sorting different colours of wool. What strikes you most is how economical every movement seems. No one expends energy unnecessarily. They sit close to the fire, minimizing the space that needs heating. They work steadily but not hurriedly. Conservation of heat, energy, and resources is built into every action. The youngest boy, perhaps 4 years old, has been watching you with undisguised curiosity. He suddenly darts to a corner of the hut and returns with something clutched in his small hand. He holds it out to you, a roughly carved wooden horse, worn smooth from handling. "For me?" you ask, surprised by the gesture. He nods enthusiastically, pushing it into your hands. Even in survival mode, there's room for play, for sharing, for humanity. The toy is clearly precious to him, probably his only one, yet he's offering it to a stranger. The grandmother says something to him, her tone gentle but firm. He looks disappointed, but nods. The mother explains with gestures. The toy belongs to the boy, but he can show it to you. Ownership means something different when you have almost nothing. As you hand the horse back, you notice its clever design. The legs are slightly weighted at the bottom, so it stands easily. Someone spent hours getting it just right, precious time carved out of a survival-focused existence to create joy for a child. Midday approaches, marked by the changing angle of the pale sunlight filtering through the small window openings. These aren't glass windows. Glass is far too expensive for peasant homes. Instead, they're openings covered with oiled parchment that lets in some light while keeping out the worst of the wind. The coverings can be opened in summer for ventilation, but remain tightly sealed in winter. The mother sets aside her spinning and moves to the fire. Lunch preparation is minimal. She uncovers a pot that's been sitting at the edge of the embers all morning. Inside is a stew that's been slowly cooking, using heat that would otherwise be wasted. Medieval slow cooker technology. What's in the stew? You wonder aloud. Looking closer, you see mostly root vegetables, turnips, carrots, perhaps some parsnips, with what might be small pieces of salted pork for flavour. Meat was precious in winter, used more as seasoning than main course. The grandmother reaches to a small pouch hanging near the fire and sprinkles something into the pot, dried herbs that immediately release a savoury aroma. Not just for flavour, many herbs have preservative properties that help prevent food spoilage, crucial when refrigeration doesn't exist. One of the middle children, a boy of perhaps 7, has been coughing intermittently. The grandmother notices and retrieves another small pouch, this one containing what looks like dried leaves. She drops a pinch into a cup, adds hot water from the pot near the fire, and hands it to the boy. Medieval medicine? You guess. Herbs weren't just for cooking. That simple tea might contain thyme, antiseptic properties, elderberry, immune support, or any number of local plants with medicinal uses. Modern pharmaceuticals are isolated versions of compounds these people were already using, albeit less precisely. The boy makes a face at the bitter taste, but drinks obediently. Getting sick in winter could be a death sentence. Everyone knows this, even the children. As the family gathers for the midday meal, you notice something else, their rotating positions. Those who sat closest to the fire this morning now move to outer spots, allowing others to take the warmest places. It's an unspoken system of heat sharing that ensures everyone gets time in the warmest spots. The stew is distributed in wooden bowls, with slightly larger portions going to the father, who returned briefly for the meal, and the oldest children. Those who burn more calories get more fuel. Simple survival math. No one complains about the distribution. This isn't unfairness, it's efficiency. They're going to need bread with that, right? You think, looking for the standard medieval accompaniment. But bread is surprisingly absent. Baking requires significant fuel for heating an oven, a luxury reserved for perhaps once a week, not daily consumption. The dense porridge and stew provide calories more efficiently. After the meal, the father returns to outside work, while the mother and older children prepare for one of the day's most important tasks, water collection. In deep winter, this means breaking ice on a nearby stream or melting snow. Either way, it's dangerous, cold work that can't be avoided. Water is non-negotiable for survival. 2 of the children grab wooden buckets and follow their mother outside, wrapped in every available layer. The youngest children stay with the grandmother, who immediately puts them to work sorting beans, removing any damaged ones from what might be seed stock for spring planting. You're struck by how there's no idleness. Every moment contains purpose, every action serves survival. Yet it doesn't feel frantic or desperate, just methodical and necessary. With fewer people in the hut, the grandmother banks the fire slightly, preserving precious wood. She notices your interest and gestures for you to come closer. She points to the fire, then to different sections of wood stacked nearby, clearly wanting to explain something. Fire management, you guess? She nods as if understanding and selects a piece of wood from one pile. Dense, heavy oak. Then she points to the flames, holds up her hand, and slowly closes it partially. The message is clear. This wood burns slowly, providing steady heat for longer periods. She selects another piece, lighter, perhaps pine, and mimics flames growing quickly. Different woods for different needs, you say, nodding. She's showing you how medieval people didn't just burn whatever they found. They understood which woods burned hot and fast, good for cooking, which burned slow and steady, good for overnight heating, and how to combine them for specific purposes. The youngest boy tugs at your sleeve and points to the corner where several rounded stones sit near the fire. He pantomimes picking one up, carefully, wrapping it in cloth and putting it in a bed. Bed warmers, simple technology but effective. Stones heated by the fire, wrapped in cloth and placed under bedding would radiate heat for hours. "You guys have thought of everything, haven't you?" you say, impressed by the ingenuity. The boy grins, clearly enjoying playing teacher to this strange adult who seems to know nothing about basic survival. He leads you to another corner of the hut where bundles of dried plants hang from the ceiling beams. Some you recognise: lavender, rosemary, sage, while others are unfamiliar. These weren't just for cooking and medicine. Many aromatic herbs repel insects and mask less pleasant smells. Some were added to fires at night to create smoke that deterred pests while making the close quarters more bearable. Medieval aromatherapy that served multiple practical purposes. The door opens, bringing a swirl of cold air and the returning water collectors. The mother and children stamp snow from their feet and quickly close the door. Their cheeks are red with cold, but they've succeeded. The wooden buckets are full of snow that will melt by the fire to become drinking and cooking water. God, that looks miserable, you think, watching them peel off outer layers stiff with ice. The mother's hands are red and chapped from exposure. No waterproof gloves in this century. Wool offers some protection, but gets soaked easily. One thing medieval people understood well was the danger of getting wet in winter. The mother immediately spreads the damp outer garments near the fire, not too close to prevent burning, but close enough to dry before they're needed again. The afternoon light is already fading, though it's only mid-afternoon. Winter days are short and darkness brings new challenges. The grandmother moves with increased purpose now, preparing for evening. She sends the oldest girl to check on the chickens in their corner. The birds have been mostly quiet during the day, but they'll need to be settled properly for the night to maximise their heat contribution. You notice the girl adding something to the chicken bedding, more dried herbs different from the cooking varieties. These have a sharper smell. Pest control, you realise. Chickens are prone to mites and lice, which can devastate a small flock. The herbs help keep the parasites at bay without harming the valuable birds. The mother is now preparing the evening meal, another pot of porridge, but this one mixed with dried peas for additional protein. The fire is built up slightly, producing more heat as the coldest hours approach. You realise how precisely they manage the flames, like adjusting a thermostat, but requiring far more skill and attention. "I would have died on day one," you mutter, watching the careful calibration of fuel to heat output. The middle boy, who's been coughing, looks worse now. His face is flushed and he moves sluggishly. The grandmother notices immediately and leads him to a spot close to the fire. She places her wrinkled hand on his forehead, frowning at the heat she feels there. Winter illness was a serious threat. With no antibiotics and limited understanding of disease transmission, even minor infections could become deadly. The grandmother reaches for her herb collection again, selecting different leaves this time. She crushes them between her fingers, releasing a sharp medicinal smell before steeping them in hot water. The mother watches with concern, but doesn't hover. There's still work to be done, mouths to feed. She can't stop everything for one sick child, no matter how worried she might be. This practical approach to crisis isn't heartlessness, it's survival. As daylight fades completely, the father returns, bringing with him an armload of freshly cut wood. He's exhausted, his breath coming in white clouds, but his first action is to check on the sick boy. He lays a rough hand gently on the child's head, eyes meeting his wife's in silent communication. "He needs more blankets," the father says, or would if you could understand him. The mother nods and retrieves something from a storage chest, a small fur, perhaps rabbit, saved for emergencies. She tucks it around the boy, who's now shivering despite the fever and nearby fire. The gravity of the situation hits you. This isn't just discomfort or inconvenience. Winter illness in medieval times often meant death, especially for children. The family's concern is palpable, but so is their resilience. They've faced this before and have systems in place. The herbs, the carefully preserved fur, the prime spot by the fire. The father hangs his snow-covered outer garments on pegs near the door, as far from the fire as possible. Melting snow near the heat source would create unwanted humidity in the already damp hut. It's another small but significant detail in their winter survival strategy. He sits heavily on a wooden stool, clearly bone-tired from a day of physical labour in freezing conditions. The grandmother hands him a steaming cup. Not just water, you notice, but something herbal, an energy restorative perhaps, or something to prevent the illness that's taken hold of his son. The oldest daughter moves to her father and begins unwrapping the cloth strips from his legs. They're damp with sweat and melted snow, dangerous to leave on as temperatures drop for the night. She sets them near the fire to dry and helps him put on dry replacements. This isn't babying a grown man, it's survival assistance for someone too exhausted to properly care for himself after ensuring the family's needs were met. "Daddy, look what I found," the youngest girl suddenly exclaims, or something similar in their language. She's been remarkably quiet until now, but her excitement breaks through as she pulls something from a pocket in her dress. It's a feather, brilliantly blue, probably from a jay. A small thing, but in the monotonous grey-brown-white palette of winter, it's a burst of vibrant colour. The father's tired face breaks into a genuine smile as he accepts the treasure. He says something that makes the girl beam with pride. Even in the grueling existence of medieval winter, there's room for joy, for appreciating beauty. The feather is carefully placed on a small shelf with other found objects: a smooth stone, an unusually shaped piece of wood, a dried flower, a family museum of simple wonders. The evening meal is served as darkness fully envelops the world outside. The family gathers close to the fire, not just for warmth but for light. The flames provide the only illumination besides a small rush lamp, a simple clay dish filled with animal fat with a wick of twisted plant fibres. Lighting was precious in winter. The rush lamp produces dim, smoky light and an unpleasant smell, but it's used sparingly and only when necessary. Most activities were designed to be done by firelight alone or from memory in near darkness. As they eat, the father tells a story. You can't understand the words, but his gestures and tone make it clear he's recounting something dramatic, perhaps a folk tale or family history. The children watch with wide eyes, momentarily distracted from the sick brother and the perpetual cold. Entertainment when Netflix isn't an option, you think, watching their rapt faces. Storytelling wasn't just pastime, it was cultural preservation, education, and community building all at once. Stories got families through long winter nights for centuries before electric lights and digital screens. After the meal, preparations for night begin in earnest. The sun set hours ago, but true bedtime approaches only now. The father adds specific woods to the fire, larger pieces that will burn slowly through the first part of the night. The mother arranges bedding, ensuring the sick boy has the warmest spot without being too close to the fire. The grandmother is preparing something at the edge of the hearth, heating stones that will go into the bedding. She's carefully selected rounded stones with no cracks that might expand and break when heated. She tests each one with a drop of water. If it sizzles too violently, the stone is too hot and might burn the bedding. This isn't casual work, it's precision engineering with the simplest materials. The chickens are settled in their corner, huddled together for warmth. The goat has been brought inside now that temperatures are plummeting. It protests briefly at being tethered in its designated area, but soon settles on the straw bedding prepared for it. Each family member has specific night preparations. The oldest girl checks that all outside garments are properly positioned to dry overnight. The middle children ensure water is available, a critical resource if someone wakes thirsty in the night. The youngest help spread fresh rushes on areas of the floor that have become damp or dirty during the day. The grandmother is now preparing something special, a warm drink for everyone before bed. It smells sweet and herbal, perhaps containing honey saved from summer. This isn't just comfort. Many herbs promote sleep and relaxation, critical for proper rest during the stressful winter months. As the family settles for the night, they don't simply lie down and expect sleep to come. There's a rhythm to their bedtime routine, a careful choreography developed over generations of winter survival. The father banks the fire, not extinguishing it, but carefully covering hot coals with ash to slow the burn rate while preserving the heat source. It's a delicate balance, and he takes his time getting it exactly right. Too much ash will smother the coals, too little will let them burn too quickly. Done perfectly, the banked fire will maintain minimal heat through the first sleep period. Each person puts on sleep caps if they weren't already wearing them. Some wrap additional cloth around their necks or over their mouths and noses, breathing warmers that capture exhaled heat and use it to warm incoming cold air. The mother checks each child one last time, tucking bedding around them to eliminate drafts. She pays special attention to the sick boy, whose coughing has settled somewhat but whose forehead still radiates heat. You watch as the family arranges themselves in their sleeping spots, children in the lofts near the ceiling where the warmest air collects, parents and grandmother on the floor where they can tend the fire during night wakings. They don't simply lie down randomly, they position themselves to maximize the benefit of every available heat source. "Good night," the father says, or whatever the medieval equivalent might be. One by one, the family members settle into their bedding, creating small nests of relative warmth in the increasingly cold hut. Outside, the temperature continues to drop as full night takes hold. Wind whistles occasionally through tiny gaps in the walls, but the structure holds firm against winter's assault. Inside, the fire glows dimly beneath its blanket of ash, waiting to be revived during the middle night waking that will come in a few hours. As the family drifts toward their first sleep of the night, you're struck by the immense knowledge embedded in their simple actions. Every movement, every decision reflects generations of accumulated wisdom about surviving winter with minimal resources. These weren't people blindly enduring hardship. They were skilled practitioners of survival arts that most modern humans have completely forgotten. The complex heating system, the strategic use of every material, the careful management of resources, all of it speaks to sophistication rather than primitiveness. The last thing you notice before the hut falls silent is the sick boy reaching for his mother's hand in the darkness. She squeezes it gently, a timeless gesture of comfort that bridges the centuries between their world and yours. Some things, at least, remain unchanged by time. You drift off as well, lulled by the rhythmic breathing of the sleeping family and the occasional soft pop from the banked fire. The hut is never truly dark. The covered embers provide a dull orange glow that casts long shadows across the walls. It's not peaceful silence like modern sleep. There's the constant rustle of straw as people shift position, the occasional cough from the sick boy, and the soft sounds of animals in their corner. It feels like only minutes have passed when your eyes open again. Something has changed in the hut. The fire has dimmed further and the temperature has dropped noticeably. Your breath forms thicker clouds now. Outside, the wind has picked up, whistling through the thatch and making the walls creak slightly. What woke you was movement. The father is sitting up, fully alert, despite having been deeply asleep moments ago. The grandmother too is awake, moving with purpose in the near darkness. No one lit a lamp or spoke a word, yet they've risen in perfect synchrony. This is what you heard about earlier, the middle night waking. Medieval people didn't sleep straight through from dusk to dawn. Instead, they broke their sleep into two distinct periods with an hour or two of wakefulness between them. The father stands, stretches briefly, and moves directly to the fire. He carefully scrapes back the layer of ash covering the embers, revealing the glowing heart of the banked fire. With practiced movements, he adds small pieces of kindling, then cups his hands and blows gently on the coals. The embers brighten immediately, and tiny flames begin to dance among the new fuel. What's wild is how alert he seems. This isn't a groggy, middle-of-the-night bathroom trip. He's fully functional, moving with purpose and precision. The grandmother is the same, checking first on the sick boy before moving to the animals in their corner, so they just wake up like this. On purpose, you wonder. It seems so contrary to modern ideas about uninterrupted sleep. The mother stirs now too, rising without hesitation or confusion. She immediately goes to her sick son, feeling his forehead with the back of her hand. Her face tightens with worry. The boy's fever hasn't broken. She exchanges glances with the grandmother, who nods and moves to her collection of dried herbs. You realise this middle night waking isn't just a quirk of medieval sleep patterns. It's a critical survival mechanism. The fire would have died completely by morning without this tending. The sick child might have worsened beyond help without this check. The coldest hours of the night are the most dangerous, and having everyone unconscious through them would be a deadly risk. The father has built the fire back to moderate strength now, careful not to make it too large and waste precious fuel, but sufficient to reheat the hut. The temperature difference is already noticeable, not warm by any means, but no longer dangerously cold. The grandmother is brewing something for the sick boy, a different mixture than the earlier medicine, this one giving off a sharp, minty smell that cuts through the smoky air. Medieval pharmacology had distinct day and night treatments, each targeting different symptoms or bodily systems. The middle children remain asleep in their lofts, but the oldest girl is awake now too, moving to help her mother with the sick brother. Together they raise his upper body, supporting him as the grandmother brings the herbal drink. The boy is barely conscious, his eyes glassy with fever, but they manage to get some of the liquid into him. They're so calm, you think, watching their methodical care. There's worry in their faces, certainly, but no panic. They've faced winter illness before and have protocols in place. Specific treatments for specific hours of the night, roles assigned and understood without discussion. The father checks the door, ensuring it's securely latched against the rising wind. He makes small adjustments to items hanging to dry, moving some closer to the refreshed fire and repositioning others that have dried sufficiently. Nothing is left to chance or overlooked. What's most striking is how this wakeful period feels entirely normal to them. This isn't insomnia or interrupted sleep in the modern sense. It's an intentional, expected part of their night, built into their understanding of how human bodies work. The mother uses this time to rearrange the sleeping furs and blankets around her sick son, creating a better cocoon of warmth. She unwraps a small bundle kept by the fire, what looks like stones wrapped in cloth, and tucks them around his body. These bed warmers, heated earlier in the evening and now reheated during the midnight waking, will help fight the fever by keeping his body at a steady temperature. So wait, you want to ask them, is this normal, waking up in the middle of the night like this? The answer, if they could give it, would surprise most modern people. Before artificial lighting extended days and changed sleep patterns, this biphasic or segmented sleep was likely the natural human norm. The pattern emerged not just from necessity, but from the body's natural rhythms when aligned with darkness and light. While the adults work, you notice something about their movements. They're all wearing additional clothing compared to daytime. Sleep caps cover their heads, tight-fitting wool that prevents heat loss through the scalp. Some have cloth wrapped around their necks as well, preventing warm air from escaping upward. The father's hands are covered too, not with bulky gloves that would make fire tending difficult, but with fitted mittens that leave his thumbs free for dexterity. Medieval people understood that extremities, hands, feet, ears, lost heat rapidly and could make the entire body feel cold, even if the core remained warm. The grandmother is now checking the animals. She places fresh feed for the chickens, who stir sleepily at her approach. The goat receives a quick check of its tether and a handful of dried grasses. These animals aren't just passive heat sources. They require care and maintenance to continue providing their warming benefits. Or weird chicken feeding time, you think, but there's method to this too. The fresh food stimulates the animal's metabolism, causing them to generate more body heat during the coldest part of the night. It's like adding fuel to a living furnace. The father has completed his fire maintenance and now moves around the hut's perimeter, checking for drafts. He pauses at one spot where the wind seems to be finding entry, takes a handful of straw mixed with clay from a container near the door and presses it into the gap. Draft proofing was an ongoing winter battle, with new leaks appearing as structures shifted in freezing and thawing cycles. What's fascinating is how this middle night period creates a different kind of consciousness, not the full alertness of day, nor the deep unconsciousness of sleep, but something in between, a liminal state where essential tasks get done while the mind remains partly in dream space. The mother finishes tending to her sick son and sits by the fire, picking up some mending work she set aside earlier. The quiet hours of middle night were often used for small, simple tasks that required minimal light, repairs to clothing, simple crafts, or food preparation for the coming day. The father joins her, not speaking, but clearly comfortable in the shared silence. He takes out a small knife and a piece of wood, working on what might become another toy, or perhaps a replacement handle for a tool. The soft scrape of the blade against wood joins the quiet symphony of night sounds, the fire's crackle, sleeping breaths, and the wind outside. The grandmother has completed her rounds and now settles near the sick boy, watching his sleep with the focused attention of someone who has nursed many through winter illness. Her gnarled hands hold a strand of beads, perhaps a rosary or some other focus for prayers or meditation. Medieval night wakings often had spiritual dimensions as well as practical ones. So what are they actually doing with this time, you wonder, watching the quiet industry around you? Research suggests this middle night waking served multiple purposes beyond fire tending. It was time for reflection, for processing the day's events or the content of first sleep dreams. Some historians believe it was an important time for memory consolidation and problem solving, the brain working through challenges in this unique state of consciousness. It was also essential social time. In the crowded, busy daylight hours, deep conversation might be impossible, but in the quiet intimacy of middle night, with most children asleep and work set aside, adults could speak of matters too private or complex for daytime discussion. As if confirming your thoughts, the mother and father begin a quiet conversation. Their voices are low, barely audible, but their serious expressions suggest important matters, perhaps concerns about the sick child, plans for stretching winter supplies, or decisions about spring planting. This wasn't idle chat, but essential family governance happening in the only time available for it. The oldest girl has completed her tasks and now sits with her grandmother, listening as the older woman shows her something about the medicinal herbs. Knowledge transfer happened in these moments, critical survival skills passed from generation to generation, in the quiet hours when younger children slept and distractions were minimal. About an hour has passed in this middle night activity when you notice the first signs of transition. The father yawns widely, stretches, and begins preparing for second sleep. He banks the fire again, though not as deeply as earlier. The coldest part of the night is still ahead, and more heat will be needed until dawn. The mother follows suit, checking once more on her sick son before returning to her sleeping place. The grandmother is the last to settle, after placing one more warmed stone near the sick boy. One by one, they wrap themselves in their bedding, adjust their sleeping caps, and position themselves for the second sleep period. What's remarkable is how natural the transition appears. There's no tossing and turning, no struggle to return to sleep as modern insomniacs might experience. They slip back into sleep with the ease of people following their body's natural rhythms rather than fighting against them. And yet, not everyone returns to sleep. The grandmother remains awake, settling into what appears to be a watch position near the sick child. In families with serious illness, night watches would rotate, ensuring someone was always alert to changes in condition or needs for additional care. Before she fully settled, the grandmother did something you didn't notice earlier. She shifted her position slightly, moving to where the father had been sleeping previously. This wasn't random. That spot had been warmed by his body heat and would stay comfortable longer than an unused section of floor. Heat mapping, the strategic use of body warmth, was another survival technique. Family members would sometimes rotate positions during the night, each taking advantage of the residual warmth left by others. Nothing was wasted, not even the heat generated by sleeping bodies. Outside, the night has deepened. The wind has settled somewhat, but the temperature continues to drop. This is the true test of all those survival systems. The hours before dawn, when cold reaches its peak and bodies are at their most vulnerable. The sick boy coughs in his sleep, a harsh sound that immediately brings his grandmother's full attention. She places a gentle hand on his chest, feeling the rise and fall of his breathing, then adjusts his coverings again. The depth of care is evident in every movement. This isn't clinical or detached, but deeply personal. You drift towards sleep yourself, lulled by the renewed quiet of the hut. The fire pops occasionally as a particularly resinous piece of wood heats, and somewhere in the distance an owl calls, a hunter taking advantage of the deep night. Your modern mind struggles to fully comprehend this medieval relationship with night and sleep. We think of sleep as a single block of time, interrupted only by problems or disturbances. But for most of human history, this segmented pattern was normal, perhaps even optimal for the human brain and body. The second sleep period feels different from the first, deeper somehow, more restful. Modern research suggests this biphasic pattern might actually offer better quality rest than the consolidated 8 hours we now consider ideal. The middle night waking allowed for hormone regulation, stress processing, and a kind of mental reset before the second sleep cycle. Hours pass in this deepened sleep state. The hut grows colder as the night approaches its darkest point, but the family's systems hold against the chill, the banked fire maintaining minimal heat, the layered bedding trapping body warmth, the sleeping bodies generating their own heat beneath caps and wrappings. You're awakened again by movement, less organised this time, more urgent. The quality of darkness has changed. It's still night, but somehow different. The deep black has shifted to a dark blue that suggests the earliest approach of dawn, though sunrise itself is still hours away. The grandmother is standing, moving quickly to the sick boy's side. The child is thrashing in his blankets, caught in the grip of a fever spike. His face is flushed, his breathing rapid. This is the crisis point that often comes in the coldest hours before dawn, when the body's resources are most depleted. The mother wakes instantly at the grandmother's soft call. She moves to her son without hesitation, her face tight with worry but her movements confident. Together, the women unwrap the outer layers of the boy's bedding, counterintuitive in the freezing cold, but necessary to bring down his dangerous fever. The father wakes next, immediately moving to rebuild the fire. More heat is needed now, not for comfort, but to boil water for the stronger medicines this crisis requires. His movements are swift but controlled. This isn't their first experience with night fever. Even in crisis, there's no wasted energy, no panic. Each person has a role, understood without discussion. The mother supports the boy's head and shoulders, helping him drink small sips of water. The grandmother prepares herbs with shaking hands, not from uncertainty, but from age and the cold. The father maintains the fire at precisely the right strength for the medicine preparation. The oldest girl wakes and immediately moves to care for the younger children, who have begun to stir at the unusual activity. She gathers them in the furthest corner of the loft, telling them a quiet story to keep them calm and out of the way of the urgent care below. You're witnessing medieval crisis management at its most efficient, a family unit functioning as a single organism, each part performing its essential role without hesitation or confusion. There's fear in their eyes, certainly. Winter fever killed countless children before modern medicine, but there's also determination and deep knowledge. The grandmother has prepared something different now, a poultice of herbs mixed with rendered animal fat. She spreads this on a cloth and places it on the boy's chest, then wraps him again, but less heavily than before. The sharp smell suggests mustard or another warming herb that will draw heat to the surface and away from his core. Fever management was sophisticated even without thermometers or modern understanding of infection. They couldn't name the bacteria or viruses, but generations of observation had taught them which symptoms responded to which treatments, when to warm and when to cool, which herbs fought infection and which reduced inflammation. "Come on, little guy," you whisper, caught up in the drama despite yourself. The family's concern is contagious, their focused care drawing you into their circle of worry and hope. The boy's breathing eases slightly as the poultice does its work. The violent thrashing calms to occasional restless movements. The mother strokes his forehead, singing a soft, repetitive melody that might be a lullaby or a prayer. In this world, the two were often indistinguishable. Outside, the first birds have begun their pre-dawn chorus, though the sky remains dark. This twilight period before true dawn has its own character, not quite night anymore, but not yet day. The family marks this transition with subtle shifts in their activities. The crisis appears to be passing as the night itself wanes. The father adds more substantial wood to the fire, building it higher than it's been all night. Morning fire serves different purposes: cooking, heating water for the day's needs, driving out the deep chill that has settled into every corner during the long darkness. The grandmother checks the sick boy once more, her expression softening slightly. She nods to the mother, a good sign, a message of cautious hope. The worst has passed, at least for now. The boy sleeps more peacefully, his breathing deeper and more regular. The mother looks exhausted but relieved. She hasn't slept since the crisis began, maintaining her vigil through the darkest hours. Now, as the first hint of grey lightens the eastern sky, she allows herself to slump slightly, the immediate danger past. They made it, you think, surprised by your own emotional investment in this family you've known for less than a day. But survival was always communal in this world. One person's crisis affected everyone, one person's skills benefited all. The interconnectedness was both practical and deeply human. As true dawn approaches, the hut begins its daily transformation. The fire burns brighter, pushing back the night's deep chill. The animals stir in their corner, the chickens beginning their morning sounds, the goat shifting on its straw bed. The younger children climb down from the loft, moving automatically to the warmest spots near the now blazing fire. The grandmother begins breakfast preparation, her movements slower than the previous day but no less precise. The crisis has taken a toll on her aging body, but her role doesn't allow for rest yet. The porridge must be made, the day's water heated, the fire maintained at the right strength for morning needs. The father prepares for another day outside. The animals must be tended, wood gathered, repairs made. Winter doesn't pause for illness or exhaustion. The survival cycle continues regardless of what transpired in the night. The oldest girl has taken over care of the sick boy, allowing her mother a brief rest before the day's work begins in earnest. She changes the poultice with practiced movements, her young face serious with responsibility. This too is part of her education, learning to care for the ill, to recognize signs of improvement or decline, to prepare the remedies her grandmother has taught her. And so the medieval day begins again, shaped by the cold, defined by survival needs, but rich with human connection and accumulated wisdom. Another day of winter to endure, another night to prepare for, another link in the long chain of survival that stretches from these people to you, centuries later in your warm, electrically heated home. The sick boy opens his eyes briefly, looking directly at you with a gaze that seems to bridge the centuries. There's recognition there, acknowledgement of shared humanity, despite the vast differences in your lives and worlds. Then his eyes close again as he drifts back to healing sleep, surrounded by the family whose knowledge and care might just see him through to spring. Morning brings a different quality of light to the hut, thin and grey, filtering through the oiled parchment coverings on the small windows. Outside, fresh snow has fallen during the night, muffling sounds and creating that peculiar winter silence where each noise stands out with crystalline clarity. The sick boy is sleeping more peacefully now, his fever having broken sometime in the pre-dawn hours. The grandmother sits beside him, her own eyes closed in a brief moment of rest after the night's crisis. Her hands resting on her lap are a map of years. Knuckles swollen from arthritis, skin thinned and spotted with age, yet still capable of the precise work of healing. Did anyone actually get any sleep last night, you wonder, watching the family move through their morning routines with heavy eyes and slower movements? The crisis has depleted their energy reserves, but the work of survival doesn't pause for recovery. The father eats his morning porridge standing up, already dressed for outside work. His face shows the strain of interrupted sleep, but there's no complaint, no mention of exhaustion. When every winter day is a battle against the elements, personal discomfort becomes background noise. Acknowledged, but not dwelled upon. "I'll check if Thomas can spare some honey," he says to his wife, or something similar in their medieval language, "for the boy." She nods gratefully. Honey wasn't just a sweetener in medieval times, it was medicine, particularly effective for respiratory illnesses. Its antibacterial properties, though not understood in those terms, had been observed for centuries, but honey in deep winter was a precious resource, saved for special needs or traded at high value. Thomas? Who's Thomas? You wonder. You're about to find out. The father finishes his meal quickly and heads for the door, pausing only to check on his son and exchange a few quiet words with the grandmother. Then he's gone, taking with him a small cloth bundle, likely something to trade for the honey. The mother moves to the fire, adding the morning's water to be heated. The oldest girl has taken over breakfast distribution, ladling porridge into wooden bowls for her younger siblings. There's a rhythm to their movements, a choreography of survival that continues regardless of circumstance. A sharp knock at the door breaks the quiet routine. The mother straightens, wiping her hands on her apron before moving to answer it. The door opens to reveal a woman of similar age, wrapped in multiple layers against the cold. Her cheeks are red from the short walk between huts, her breath clouding in the freezing air. "Sarah," the mother says, or whatever name would have been common in their time and place. The women embrace briefly before the visitor is ushered inside. The door quickly closed against the cold. The visitor immediately notices the sick boy and moves toward him, her face creased with concern. She exchanges words with the grandmother, who nods wearily and makes room for the newcomer to check the child herself. What you're witnessing isn't just a neighbourly visit. In medieval villages, certain women became known for their healing skills. Not formal midwives or physicians, but respected community healers whose knowledge supplemented each family's basic medical abilities. This woman appears to be one such person, her confident assessment of the boy suggesting experience with winter illnesses. She reaches into a small bag hanging at her waist and pulls out a bundle of dried herbs different from those the grandmother has been using. The two women confer, comparing approaches, combining knowledge. There's no competition here, just collaboration toward the shared goal of the child's recovery. "I told my Jacob to help your man with the north fence," the visitor says to the mother. Again, not the exact words, but the meaning is clear from her gestures and the mother's grateful nod. This is medieval community in action. Word of the family's crisis has spread and help has materialized. Not just medical knowledge, but practical assistance with the father's daily tasks, ensuring survival work continues while the family manages the illness. The visitor doesn't stay long. She has her own household to run, but her brief presence has changed the atmosphere in the hut. The shared burden feels lighter, the mother's face less strained, the grandmother more confident in her treatments now that they've been confirmed by another knowledgeable woman. As the visitor departs, she leaves behind the bundle of herbs and something else, a small clay pot that the mother receives with obvious gratitude. Honey, perhaps, or another remedy too precious to be spared without serious need. Well, that was nice of her, you think, watching the door close behind the departing neighbour. But this wasn't mere niceness. In medieval winter, community cooperation wasn't optional. It was essential survival strategy. Today your child is sick. Tomorrow it might be your neighbour's. The shared knowledge and resources created resilience no single family could achieve alone. The oldest girl has taken the younger children outside for their morning toilet needs, a cold but necessary journey to the household's designated waste area, likely a simple pit latrine at a sensible distance from the hut. Modern bathroom privacy is a luxury these people never expected, especially in winter when speed and efficiency trumped modesty. With the children momentarily absent, the mother and grandmother prepare a fresh treatment for the sick boy. The new herbs are crushed and steeped in hot water, creating a tea that smells sharply medicinal. The grandmother supports the boy's head, while the mother helps him drink the bitter liquid. He grimaces but swallows obediently. Even young children understood the seriousness of winter illness. The hut is warming now as the morning fire reaches full strength. It's still cold by modern standards. You'd probably set your thermostat around 50 degrees if you were trying to replicate this temperature, but after the deep chill of night, it feels almost comfortable. A different visitor arrives, an older man, stooped with age but still moving with purpose. He stamps snow from his feet before entering, bringing with him the smell of wood smoke from a different fire and the sharp winter air. The grandfather, perhaps, or an elder from another household. His visit has a different purpose. He speaks to the mother while looking at the ceiling beams, gesturing upward with concerns evident in his expression. She nods, pointing to areas where the thatch seems thinner or the supporting structure shows signs of strain. Winter brought structural challenges to medieval homes. Snow weight could collapse poorly maintained roofs. Freeze-thaw cycles could weaken daub walls. This elder appears to be conducting an assessment, sharing his experience of building maintenance to prevent disaster. His careful examination of the roof structure and walls is another form of community support. Early intervention could prevent catastrophic failure during the worst of winter. "I'll send the boys tomorrow," he tells the mother, making what seems to be a promise of labour help. Roof repairs, even minor ones, weren't one-person jobs, and with the father focused on his sick son and essential daily tasks, the community steps in to fill the gap. The older man accepts a small cup of something hot, likely not the precious herbs saved for the sick child, but perhaps a tea made from pine needles. Such teas provided vitamin C and other nutrients crucial for winter health, staving off scurvy and boosting immune systems taxed by cold and limited diet. Before leaving, the elder pauses by the sick boy, placing a weathered hand gently on his forehead in what might be a blessing or simply a grandfatherly gesture of concern. These momentary connections, small touches, brief visits, shared knowledge, formed the social fabric that made survival possible. As the morning progresses, the mother begins preparations for the midday meal. She retrieves items from various storage containers around the hut, dried beans that have been soaking since yesterday, preserved vegetables from underground storage, a small piece of salted meat for flavour. Medieval food preservation was sophisticated out of necessity. Nothing edible could be wasted, and summer's abundance had to stretch through winter's scarcity. The vegetables, likely turnips, carrots, and cabbage, had been stored in straw-lined pits that stayed just above freezing. The technique kept them edible, if somewhat shriveled, for months. The meat came from fall slaughtering, preserved through smoking and salting. Fresh meat in deep winter was rare unless a hunt was successful, which became increasingly unlikely as wild animals struggled with their own winter survival. Most protein now came from preserved sources: smoked meats, dried fish, aged cheese if the family was fortunate enough to have milk-producing animals. The grandmother has rallied somewhat after her brief rest and now supervises the youngest children, who have returned from their outdoor expedition red-cheeked and hungry. She sets them to simple tasks: sorting beans, breaking preserved vegetables into pot-sized pieces that keep them occupied while contributing to the household work. The sick boy stirs again, more alert than earlier. The mother immediately moves to his side, helping him sit up slightly to drink some of the clear broth she skimmed from the cooking pot. Maintaining hydration was crucial for fever recovery, and even weak broth provided both liquid and nutrients. Or mama, he says, a word recognizable in almost any language, especially when spoken by a child seeking comfort. The mother smooths his hair back from his forehead, murmuring reassurances as she checks his temperature with her lips pressed to his skin, a method mothers have used across centuries to gauge fever. The door opens again, bringing a swirl of cold air and the father's return. His arms are full of firewood, and something hangs from his belt, a pair of rabbits, their fur white with winter camouflage. The successful hunt brings a change to the family's energy. Fresh meat in winter was both nutrition and celebration. Jacob spotted them near the old oak, the father explains as he hands the rabbits to his wife. The community support has paid dividends beyond the immediate help with tasks. Extra eyes in the forest meant better hunting chances, and by custom, successful hunters shared information about game sightings with others. The father moves immediately to check on his son, relief visible in his face when he sees the boy awake and somewhat improved. He produces something from his pocket, a small clay pot that must contain the honey he sought from Thomas. The grandmother receives it with a nod of approval, immediately incorporating some into the next dose of herbal medicine. The atmosphere in the hut has shifted with the father's return and the boy's improvement. There's a cautious optimism now, a sense that the crisis is passing. The rabbits represent unexpected bounty, the honey a specific medicine for the child's recovery, and the continued community support a buffer against winter's hardships. The mother hands the rabbits to her oldest daughter, who takes them outside for the initial preparation. Butchering was not segregated from children's awareness in medieval life. Even young ones understood where food came from and often participated in its preparation from earliest ages. The girl will remove the fur saved for small projects, clean the carcasses, and preserve any parts not used for immediate cooking. Nothing would be wasted. The blood would be collected for sausage or pudding, the organs eaten first as they spoiled quickest, the bones saved for broth, and even the sinew kept for thread or binding material. The fur would become mittens or hat lining, or perhaps a comfort item for the smallest child. The midday meal preparation continues with the prospect of fresh meat adding variety to the planned stew. The mother adjusts her cooking accordingly, setting aside a portion of the rabbit meat to be preserved for future meals. Even in relative bounty, the medieval mind stayed focused on future scarcity. More village children appear at the door, friends of the older children coming to check on the sick boy and perhaps hoping for tasks that might earn them a taste of the rabbit stew. The mother sends them on small errands, bringing a bucket of snow to melt for water, carrying a message to another household, helping the oldest daughter with the rabbits. These children move through the winter landscape with confident familiarity. They know which paths stay passable after snowfall, which icicles indicate roof leaks that might weaken structures, which smoke patterns from chimneys suggest households needing assistance. Their environmental literacy is instinctive, absorbed through observation rather than formal teaching. As midday approaches, the hut fills with savoury smells that make even the sick boy perk up slightly. The stew bubbles at the edge of the fire, vegetables softening and flavours melding. The grandmother has prepared a special portion for the sick child, mostly broth with tiny bits of meat, the most digestible combination for someone recovering from fever. The father has been making repairs to a wooden tool, perhaps a shovel or hoe, replacing a cracked handle with a piece of seasoned wood he's been saving for this purpose. The work keeps him near the fire and his sick son while still accomplishing necessary maintenance. Medieval winter was repair season. Time to fix everything that would be needed when spring's work began in earnest. The youngest children have been playing a simple game with pebbles and a marked piece of leather, something like modern tic-tac-toe, but with different rules. Their laughter provides counterpoint to the serious work of survival, a reminder that even in hardship, humanity finds space for play and joy. The midday meal is served as the weak winter sun reaches its highest point, still pitifully low in the northern sky, providing minimal warmth but crucial psychological comfort with its light. The family gathers around the fire, each accepting their portion with murmured thanks or silent nods. The sick boy manages a few spoonfuls of broth and tiny bites of rabbit before tiring. It's a good sign. Appetite returning suggests recovery beginning, but he's still weak from the night's fever. The grandmother helps him lie back down, tucking the bedding around him with practiced care. Conversation during the meal is minimal. Practical exchanges about afternoon tasks, updates on the roof concerns, plans for using the rabbit remains. Medieval mealtimes weren't dominated by social chatter, as modern ones often are. Food was fuel, eating was necessary work, and conversation served specific purposes rather than entertainment. After eating, the father prepares to return outside. There's still daylight and essential tasks remain. Checking animal shelters, gathering more firewood, perhaps setting snares in hopes of additional game. Winter days were short and every moment of light had to be used efficiently. Before leaving, he confers briefly with his wife and mother-in-law. Their faces are serious as they discuss what appears to be a change in plans. The boy's illness has disrupted normal patterns, requiring redistribution of tasks. The mother will now handle some outdoor work, normally done by the father, allowing him to focus on heavier labour while she remains closer to the hut and her sick child. This flexibility was essential to medieval survival. Rigid gender roles existed in many contexts, but winter crisis demanded practical adaptations. When survival hung in the balance, capability trumped convention. The mother is clearly experienced with the outdoor tasks she's taking on, suggesting this isn't the first time such adjustments have been necessary. As the father leaves again, the grandmother oversees the meal cleanup, a simple process of scraping bowls clean and returning them to their storage shelf. The cooking pot remains at the fire's edge, the remaining stew continuing to simmer for the evening meal. The oldest daughter takes the used bowls outside to scour them with snow, an efficient cleaning method that required no precious heated water. The hut settles into afternoon rhythm. The grandmother returns to her spinning, the younger children to quiet play or simple tasks. The sick boy drifts between sleep and wakefulness, each period of alertness slightly longer than the last, another good sign. The mother prepares for her outdoor tasks, layering additional clothing and wrapping her legs and feet carefully. Proper preparation for cold exposure was essential knowledge. The difference between discomfort and dangerous frostbite often came down to how garments were layered and secured. "I'll be just behind the storage shed," she tells the grandmother, or words to that effect. "Send Marta if he worsens." Marta must be the oldest daughter, currently feeding kitchen scraps to the chickens in their corner. The mother's outdoor work will keep her within earshot of the hut, close enough to return quickly if needed, but far enough to accomplish necessary tasks. This balance of responsibility was constant in medieval parenting, especially during winter when both childcare and survival work intensified in importance and difficulty. As the door closes behind her, the hut feels different again, quieter with two adults gone, more focused on maintenance than active work. The grandmother hums softly as she spins, the repetitive motion and sound almost hypnotic in the afternoon dimness. The younger children have settled into that peculiar winter state, not quite napping but energy conserved, movements minimal, voices lowered. This conservation mode was another winter survival strategy. Between active work periods, medieval people often entered a state of reduced activity, not true hibernation, but a similar energy-preserving response to cold and limited food. Modern people rarely experience this state, with constant artificial light, stable temperatures, and abundant food disrupting seasonal rhythms. The afternoon deepens, shadows. Between 1929 and 1933, roughly 25% of all Americans lost their jobs, over 9,000 banks collapsed, and entire nations fell into economic ruin from a financial disaster that spread like wildfire across continents. The crash was swift and merciless, but for those caught in its grip, life somehow continued in the shadow of economic devastation. Here's what life was really like during the Great Depression. Hey, quick thing before we start. If you actually listen to these regularly, hit like or subscribe. I always wonder where everyone's at, so comment your city and what time it is. Weird to think some of you are having breakfast in London while I'm recording this at night here in the States. Alright, tonight it's the Great Depression, but before we go anywhere, get comfortable. Seriously. Adjust those pillows. Pull up that blanket, because where we're going, you're going to want to be cozy. Your eyes snap open to darkness. The room is ice cold. October in New York, 1929, and coal for heating is already being rationed in your building. Your stomach growls painfully, not like the mild hunger when you skip lunch. This is day 3 without a proper meal hunger, the kind that makes your body literally start to consume itself. You're not sleeping on the street, not yet, but the mattress beneath you is thin and lumpy, nothing like your comfortable bed right now. Your apartment is small, but it's shelter. For how much longer though? That's the question keeping you up at night. 3 days ago you had a decent job at a factory. 3 days ago you had savings. 3 days ago the stock market was riding high and America was prosperous. Then came Black Thursday. The thing about economic disasters is they happen in slow motion and all at once. It's like watching a train wreck from inside the train. For years, people had been pouring money into stocks, borrowing cash to buy more stocks, using those stocks as collateral to borrow even more. It was basically a nationwide pyramid scheme, and on October 24th, 1929, the whole thing came crashing down. Extra, extra. The paperboy's voice cuts through the morning fog as you walk to the employment office. Stock market collapses, worst crash in history. You remember yesterday's scenes outside the New York Stock Exchange, men in expensive suits with blank expressions. The wealthy jumping from buildings isn't just a myth, it actually happened. Not in the numbers people imagine, but enough that ambulance crews were kept busy scraping the remains of once wealthy brokers off the pavement. "Did you hear about George?" one man whispers to another in the growing unemployment line. "Lost everything. His wife found him in the garage with the car running. At least he had a car," the other man replies. The unemployment office is chaos. Hundreds of people, maybe thousands, all fighting for the same few jobs. The man behind the counter looks exhausted, his eyes bloodshot. "Nothing today," he tells you without looking up. "Try again tomorrow." But tomorrow will be the same, and the day after, and the day after that. Wait, I need you to understand what this actually felt like. This wasn't just a bad day in the stock market. This was the entire economic system of the United States, the richest country on earth, completely collapsing. Imagine every financial certainty in your life vanishing overnight. The market will recover, the newspapers say. President Herbert Hoover makes reassuring statements. Prosperity is just around the corner, but you're not stupid. You can see the truth with your own eyes. On your way home, you pass a bank. There's a crowd outside, growing larger by the minute, people pounding on the locked doors, some crying, others shouting, a bank run. When people lose faith in banks, they all rush to withdraw their money at once. But here's the thing about banks in 1929. They don't keep all your money on hand. They lend it out. So when everyone wants their cash at the same time, the bank fails. They can't just keep our money, a woman screams, her face red with anger. That's my life savings in there. But they can, and they did. Between 1930 and 1933, nearly half of all American banks failed. If your money was in one of them, it was just gone. No FDIC insurance, no government bailout, just gone. You know what's really wild? Before the crash, the economy seemed unstoppable. The roaring 20s were exactly that. Roaring with excess, jazz, illegal booze during Prohibition, and money that seemed to multiply like magic in the stock market. 10 grand, your neighbour had boasted last month. Started with just $500 last year. The market only goes up, friend. Only goes up. He jumped from his 10th floor apartment 2 days after the crash. By evening, you're back in your apartment, counting the money you have left. $6.17. The rent is due in a week. $5. That leaves $1 and change for food to last, well, until you find work, whenever that might be. You think about your parents back in Chicago. Could you move back home? The thought makes your stomach twist with shame. 30 years old and crawling back to your parents, but shame doesn't fill an empty stomach. On the street below, a commotion draws you to the window. A family is being evicted, their furniture, clothes and personal belongings thrown carelessly onto the sidewalk. The mother is crying, clutching a baby to her chest. The father stands motionless, his expression blank with shock. 2 small children cling to their mother's skirt, confused and frightened. This scene is playing out all across America. By 1932, thousands of families will be evicted every day in major cities. The next morning, you join what people are starting to call a bread line. Hundreds of people waiting for free soup and a piece of bread from a charity kitchen. The line stretches around the block. You take your place at the end, swallowing your pride. This is survival now. "First time?" asks the man in front of you, not unkindly. You nod. "You'll get used to it," he says. "Was a bank manager myself before all this. Now look at me." He gestures to his threadbare coat and worn shoes. That's the thing about the Depression that's hard to understand now. It wasn't just the poor who suffered. The middle class was decimated. People who thought they were secure, professionals, managers, skilled workers, suddenly found themselves destitute. "The thing is," the former bank manager continues, "nobody's immune. I had customers, millionaires on paper, who lost everything in a day. One fella came in to withdraw $1 million. By the time we closed that afternoon, his stocks weren't worth the paper they were printed on." The soup, when you finally get it after 3 hours of waiting, is thin and flavourless. The bread is stale, but it's food. You wolf it down, trying not to think about when you'll eat again. Back in your apartment, you turn on the radio, one luxury you've maintained. President Hoover is speaking, assuring the nation that the economy is fundamentally sound, that prosperity will return. "He's full of shit," says your neighbour through the thin wall. "Sorry for the language," he adds, probably remembering your shared wall. "No, you're right," you call back. This casual conversation through the wall has become your main social interaction. "Got any coffee?" he asks. "Just the grounds from yesterday, already used them twice." Bring 'em over, I'll show you how to get a third cup out of them. And this is how people survived. Sharing, stretching, making do. Coffee grounds used multiple times. Soup made from ketchup and hot water. Clothing mended and remended until the original fabric was more patch than garment. The crazy part, the stores were full of food. The problem wasn't supply. It was that people had no money to buy anything. Farmers were destroying crops because prices had fallen so low it wasn't worth bringing them to market, while people in cities were starving. In Iowa, farmers poured milk onto highways rather than sell it for pennies. In California, oranges rotted in vast piles while children in New York developed diseases from malnutrition. It's one of history's cruelest ironies, starvation amidst plenty. The next day brings rumours that the stock market is recovering. People are hopeful again. Maybe this will all blow over quickly. Maybe Hoover is right about prosperity being just around the corner. You hear of a factory across town that might be hiring. You spend your precious pennies on a trolley fare, only to find hundreds of men already waiting when you arrive. Some have been there since dawn. They're taking applications, one man tells you, but they've got 20 spots and there must be 500 of us here. You wait anyway. What choice do you have? By noon, a factory foreman comes out. No more jobs today, he shouts. Try again next week. The crowd's disappointment is palpable, a wave of despair washing over hundreds of faces. Men turn away, shoulders slumped, shuffling back to wherever they came from. But one man doesn't move. That's it? He shouts. We wait all morning and that's it? The foreman ignores him, turning to go back inside. My kids are hungry, the man screams, his voice breaking. My kids haven't eaten in 2 days. Other men join in now, their voices rising in anger and desperation. For a moment, it feels like the crowd might rush the factory gates. There's a dangerous energy building, the kind that precedes violence. You back away. You've heard about riots breaking out in other cities, hungry, desperate people looting grocery stores and warehouses. You don't want to be part of that, but you understand it now. Hunger does things to people. It strips away civilization, reduces humans to their most basic instincts. Your own empty stomach has been teaching you this lesson. You find yourself walking past neighbourhoods you'd never normally enter, the wealthy areas, the homes with lights still on, cars still in driveways, smoke still curling from chimneys, the people who survived the crash, or even profited from it, buying stocks at rock-bottom prices. The divide between rich and poor existed before the crash, but now it's a canyon, gaping and impossible to ignore. Here's something wild about economic depressions. They're not equal opportunity disasters. While millions were plunged into poverty, others barely noticed. The truly wealthy, old money, not the nouveau riche who gambled everything on stocks, continued much as before. Their servants might have accepted lower wages, their portfolios might have taken a hit, but they weren't standing in bread lines. Walking back to your apartment, you pass a Hooverville, one of the shanty towns springing up in cities across America, named mockingly after the president who seemed unable or unwilling to address the crisis. Makeshift shelters cobbled together from scrap wood, cardboard, tin sheets, whatever people could find. Entire families living in conditions you wouldn't keep animals in. You wonder how many of those people had normal lives just weeks ago. 2 children play in the dirt outside one of the shacks, using sticks and rocks as toys. They're thin, their clothes dirty and too small, but they're laughing. Children adapt. Somehow they find joy even in the darkest circumstances. The next morning brings news that reverberates through the city like a thunderclap. The stock market, which had been recovering slightly, has crashed again. Any hope of a quick resolution to the crisis vanishes. You think about that neighbour who boasted of his market gains, the one who jumped. You understand him better now. A week passes, your rent comes due. The landlord, a man named Gianelli, who's always been fair in the past, knocks on your door. "I know things are tough," he says, not meeting your eyes. "But I got the bank breathing down my neck. If I don't collect, I lose the building." You hand over your $5, leaving yourself with just over $1 for how long? You don't know. "Thanks," he says, pocketing the money. Then, unexpectedly, he pulls out a paper bag. "My wife made extra stew, said to give it to you." The simple kindness brings tears to your eyes. You're too choked up to speak, so you just nod your thanks. That night, as you savour each bite of the stew, actual meat, vegetables, flavour, you listen to the radio. The news is spreading beyond America now. The economic disaster isn't contained. It's jumping borders, crossing oceans. In Germany, already struggling under the weight of war reparations from the Treaty of Versailles, banks are failing. In Britain, unemployment is soaring. The global economy is interconnected in ways people barely understood until it all began to unravel. You think about your job at the factory, making parts that were shipped overseas. The factory closed because orders dried up. Those orders dried up because companies in other countries were failing. Those companies were failing because their customers had no money. And round it goes, a perfect circle of economic destruction. The stew is gone too quickly. You use bread to wipe the bowl clean, not wasting a drop. Then you lie back on your bed, staring at the ceiling, wondering what tomorrow will bring. Outside, the city that never sleeps has taken on a different rhythm. Not the frenetic energy of prosperity, but the restless stirring of worry, of hunger, of fear. In just a few short weeks, the world has changed completely, and the depression is only just beginning. What's happening in America is just the first tremor. The economic earthquake will soon shake the entire world, toppling governments, birthing extremist movements, redrawing the map of global power. In Germany, a political party that garnered only 2.6% of the vote in 1928 will soon find fertile ground for their message among the unemployed and desperate. Their leader, a failed artist with a talent for channeling anger, will rise on the tide of economic misery. In Britain, the pound sterling, once the world's most stable currency, will be forced off the gold standard, a humiliation for a nation that prided itself on financial strength. In Japan, military leaders will point to the economic crisis as proof that their nation must expand, must secure resources and markets by force if necessary. But all of that is still to come. For now, in late 1929, there is just the dawning realization that the prosperity of the Roaring Twenties was built on sand. The party is over, the bill has come due, and ordinary people, millions upon millions of them, are the ones who will pay it. As you drift towards sleep, your empty stomach growling, you wonder how long this can last. Surely things will improve soon. The government will step in, the economy will recover, life will return to normal. But deep down, this isn't a temporary setback. This is something new, something vast and terrible. This is the Great Depression, and it's just getting started. You've made it to 1930 somehow. The winter was brutal, not just the cold, but the grinding uncertainty of each day. Every morning, the same question. Will I eat today? Your apartment is gone now. Couldn't make rent after December. You're staying at the YMCA when you can scrape together 15 cents for a bed on park benches when you can't. Central Park has become an unofficial campground for the newly homeless. At night, if you squint, the clusters of makeshift shelters almost look like a festival. Almost. "Morning, Professor," says Joe, nodding as you emerge from your spot beneath a cluster of pine trees. Joe was a construction worker before the crash. Now he's the unofficial mayor of this section of the park. He calls everyone Professor, regardless of their former occupation. "Any leads today?" you ask, stretching your stiff limbs. "Heard they're hiring at the docks. Just day labour, but it's something." You nod your thanks and head toward the harbour. The docks are always worth checking, though the competition for work is fierce. 500 men might show up for 20 spots unloading cargo, if there's even cargo to unload. International trade is drying up fast. The scene at the docks is exactly as you expected, a sea of desperate men. Some have been dockhands all their lives, their bodies shaped by years of lifting and hauling. Others, like you, are newcomers to this world, former office workers and shopkeepers. The foreman appears at 6 sharp. "Need 20 today," he shouts above the murmur of the crowd. The press of bodies is immediate, everyone surging forward. You're caught in the middle, pushed and pulled. Someone's elbow catches your ribs. Another man steps on your foot, but you keep moving forward. The foreman points randomly. You. Each man selected quickly steps aside, relief washing over their faces. By some miracle, you're chosen. Maybe it's because you've managed to keep your clothes relatively clean. Maybe it's just dumb luck. Either way, you're working today. The work is brutal, unloading crates from a ship that's come in from South America. Coffee mostly. The irony isn't lost on you. You haven't tasted real coffee in months, making do with reused grounds or chicory substitutes. Now you're handling crates of the stuff, worth more than you'll earn in a month. "Slow boat," comments one of the veteran dockhands during a rare break. "Usually 3 ships a week from Brazil, now maybe 1. "Why's that?" you ask, gulping water from a communal bucket. "Tariffs," he spits. "Goddamn smoot, Hawley. President signed it last month, raised taxes on imports to protect American jobs. But you know what happens when we tax their goods? They tax ours back," you reply. "Bingo, Professor." He doesn't know Joe calls you that too. "So now nobody's buying, nobody's selling, and we're all screwed 6 ways from Sunday." The Smoot-Hawley tariff. You'd read about it in the papers. Over 1,000 economists had signed a petition begging President Hoover not to sign it. But Congress pushed it through and Hoover caved. Now international trade, already wounded by the crash, was being strangled by protectionist policies. By noon, your back is screaming and your hands are raw, but you've earned $1, a whole dollar for 6 hours of back-breaking labour. 5 years ago, you'd have scoffed at such wages. Today, it feels like winning the lottery. "Same time tomorrow?" you ask the foreman as he hands you your pay. He shakes his head. Ships unloaded, nothing else scheduled this week. And just like that, you're unemployed again. You use a nickel to ride the subway uptown, not towards Central Park, but to Grand Central Station. You've made a decision. New York is dying. Time to try somewhere else. The station is both busy and eerily quiet. People move with purpose, but there's a hushed quality, as if everyone's afraid to make too much noise. The giant departures board clacks as it updates. You scan for the cheapest destinations. Chicago? Your parents are there, but the shame of returning home is still too much. Cleveland, Pittsburgh, more industrial cities, probably suffering just as much as New York. Then you see it, Kansas City, the heart of farming country. Surely farmers are still doing okay. People always need to eat, right? And the ticket is just $8.75. You can almost afford it with your day's wages. You approach the ticket counter. "When's the next train to Kansas City?" 8:15 tonight, says the bored-looking clerk. "I'll take it." You count out your money carefully, almost all of your dollar from today, plus most of your meager savings. You're left with 45 cents to your name, but you have a ticket out. The train is crowded, mostly with people leaving the city rather than coming to it. You find a seat next to an elderly man reading a newspaper. Heading west? He asks, folding his paper. Kansas City, you reply. Thought I might find work on the farms. He gives you a look that's half pity, half amusement. Might want to rethink that plan, son. He hands you his newspaper, folded to show a headline, Dust Storms Ravage Plains, Crops Destroyed. The article describes apocalyptic scenes across Kansas, Oklahoma, Texas. Years of over-farming combined with drought have turned the topsoil to dust. Massive clouds of it sweeping across the plains, burying farms and towns. Been farming outside Wichita for 40 years, the old man says. Never seen anything like it. Dust gets into everything. Your clothes, your food, your lungs. Can't grow a damn thing. So why are you going back, you ask. It's still home, he says simply. Where else would I go? You stare out the window as the train rumbles west, watching America roll by. The countryside should be beautiful in June, but instead it looks tired, neglected. Abandoned cars rust by the roadside. Farms sit empty, fields untended. You fall asleep eventually, lulled by the rhythm of the train. When you wake, the landscape has changed. Flatter now, the Great Plains stretching to the horizon, but the sky has a strange colour. Brownish, hazy. Dust, says your companion, noticing your confused expression. We're getting close. Kansas City, when you arrive, is coated in a fine layer of brown. It's on the buildings, the streets, the few cars that move slowly through the haze. People wear bandanas over their faces as they walk. Some have goggles to protect their eyes. You pull your shirt up over your nose as you step off the train. The dust immediately coats your tongue, gritty and dry. "Oh, first time in dust country?" asks a porter, noticing your reaction. You get used to it, or you leave. Your plan to find farm work is clearly dead on arrival. If farmers can't even grow crops, they sure as hell aren't hiring. But you're here now with 45 cents and no return ticket. The porter seems to read your mind. If you're looking for work, try the rail yards. They're always needing men to clean the engines. Dust gets in the machinery. The rail yards are on the edge of town, a sprawling complex of tracks, roundhouses and repair sheds. You find the foreman's office easily enough. Got experience with trains? He asks, not looking up from his paperwork. Quick learner, you offer. He sighs, finally meeting your eyes. Everyone's a quick learner these days. Got hundreds of quick learners looking for work. You're about to turn away when he adds, "But I need someone right now. Engine 4522 came in caked with dust. Needs to be cleaned before it seizes up completely. Pays 30 cents an hour. It's less than the docks in New York, but it's something. I'll take it." The work is even worse than unloading coffee. You're squeezed into the cramped spaces of a locomotive, scrubbing dust from every surface, every gear, every pipe. The air is thick with it, despite the bandana over your face. Your eyes sting, your throat burns. By day's end, you're filthy, exhausted, and have earned a grand total of $2.40. The foreman seems satisfied with your work. "Come back tomorrow," he says. "Got 3 more engines need cleaning." You find a boarding house that charges 50 cents a night. It's cleaner than the YMCA in New York at least. You use some of your earnings to buy dinner at a cheap diner. Actual hot food, the first real meal you've had in weeks. The diner is half empty, but those who are there seem to be railroad men. Their conversations revolve around reduced schedules, routes being cut. Passenger service to Denver's being suspended, one says. Not enough riders to justify the run. Freight to Chicago's down 60%, adds another. Used to be 6 trains daily, now it's 2, and they're half empty. The railroads were America's arteries, carrying goods and people across the continent. Now they're clotting, slowing, failing, another symptom of the economic disease spreading through the nation. You work at the rail yards for a week, cleaning engines and eventually helping with simple repairs. The dust is a constant enemy, working its way into everything, but the pay is steady and you're able to save a little. On Sunday, your day off, you explore Kansas City. The downtown is a mix of beautiful Art Deco buildings and emptied storefronts. Roughly a third of businesses appear closed. For rent and going out of business signs paper the windows. A small crowd has gathered outside a bank. Your stomach drops. Another bank run. But as you get closer, you realise it's not that. The bank is already closed, permanently. People are just standing there, staring at the locked doors, as if willing them to open. "Had my life savings in there," says a woman, noticing your gaze. 28 years of careful saving. Gone. "They didn't give you anything?" you ask. She gives a bitter laugh. 10 cents on the dollar. My $6,000 became $600, not even enough to pay off my mortgage. You do the math in your head. That's more money than you've ever had, and it vanished overnight. "What will you do?" you ask. She shrugs. "My sister's in St. Louis, says I can stay with her. Better than the street, I guess." By August, the dust storms are getting worse. Some days the sky turns completely black at noon, as if night has fallen early. People call them black blizzards. The dust is so thick it suffocates livestock in the fields. Children die from dust pneumonia, their lungs filled with dirt. The railroad work begins to dry up. Cutting back, the foreman tells you, can only offer 3 days a week now. It's not enough to live on. You need another plan. You hear rumours that California is better off. The farms in the Central Valley are still producing. There's work picking fruit, harvesting vegetables. You've met several families heading that way, packing everything they own onto ancient cars and trucks. "Go west, young man," jokes a fellow railroad worker, quoting Horace Greeley, though California ain't what it used to be either. You consider it. Your savings from the railroad work would buy a bus ticket to Los Angeles, but something holds you back. Maybe it's caution, maybe it's fear of the unknown, or maybe it's the stories you've heard. California police stationed at the state borders, turning away undesirables without proof of employment or sufficient funds. Instead, you decide to head south. Texas, Louisiana, the Gulf Coast, warmer climates where winter won't be as threatening. The bus ride to Houston takes 2 days. You arrive with sore muscles and 632 to your name. The city is bustling compared to Kansas City. The oil industry has cushioned the blow somewhat, though even here the depression's effects are visible. You find work at the docks again, this time loading cotton onto ships bound for England. It's seasonal work. The cotton harvest has just come in, but the pay is decent. 45 cents an hour, 10-hour days. You can actually save money. The boarding house you find is full of men like you, drifters, workers following jobs wherever they appear. The conversations at dinner each night are a catalogue of America's suffering. "Spent the spring in Detroit," says a wiry man named Frank. "Auto plants all but shut down. Ford went from 5-day work weeks to 3. People living in the factories because they got nowhere else to go." "Chicago's worse," adds another. "Tried to get work at the stockyards. They're killing cattle by the thousands. Government buying them just to prop up prices. Perfectly good beef being destroyed while people starve." A pattern emerges in these stories, the disconnect between abundance and scarcity, farmers ploughing under crops they can't sell while city dwellers go hungry, factories sitting idle while their products are desperately needed, money concentrated in banks and corporate coffers while ordinary people have none. One night, a new arrival joins the dinner table. His name is Klaus, a German immigrant who'd been working as an engineer in Pennsylvania until the steel mills closed. "America bad now?" "Yes," he says in accented English. "But Europe," he makes a gesture like an explosion, "much worse." He tells you about his family back in Berlin. His brother, an accountant, lost his job when German banks